right. Welcome, everyone. This is the Grand Rapids Public Schools Finance Committee meeting. Today is Monday, January 30th. Welcome to our new board members and new committee members to your very first Finance Committee meeting. This committee sees a lot of information, and I, as your chair, am going to do my best to make sure that we provide context and information as we go along. Ms. Cribbs and I were meeting in advance of this meeting, and we're developing a calendar of kind of deep dive topics that we'll have at every single finance meeting this year to help onboard our new board members to the work of the committee. So we won't be able to answer every single question today, I'm sure, but know that we'll be taking notes and making sure that we put that topic on a later agenda to make sure that you have a comprehensive understanding of the things that we talk about here and vote on. So with that, speaking of, we're going to lead into this very first committee meeting of the year with a Finance 101. So just do a quick overview of how this nearly $250 million budget works every single year. All right, Ms. Cribbs.
Okay, we will start down through. And you'll learn I'm a little technology challenged, but Julie tries to keep me in line, so. So just to start on a high level basis, we, as a governmental entity, operate under fund accounting rules. So our biggest fund is our general fund. It is used to record the transactions for the operation of our school district, educational programs, and other type support of education programs. We also include our athletics and our grant funds as part of our general fund. And for our internal purposes, we want to track our general operating versus our grants versus athletics. So frequently, you'll see the three columns and they get combined, but they're all still just our general fund. With grant funds, they are only to be used for specified purposes by that individual grant. Special revenue funds, it's another accounting term. So these funds are for designated purposes which require separate accounting because of legal or regulatory provisions or administrative actions. So our food service fund is our biggest special revenue fund. So that's more under the legal or regulatory requirements there. The administrative actions are more for the GRASP and Houseman Field. GRASP is our Grand Rapids Area Summer Program that we operate. It is a program that is out there not only for our students, but it actually gets used from school districts and families throughout the country. And they pay a fee to participate in that program. So it is its own revenue generating program. That's why we've got it separated in a special revenue fund. Houseman Field is, again, it has its own revenue stream for the events that happen at Houseman Field, so that's why it's in special revenue as well. The last two, the student and school activity and the public purpose trust funds, are new to special revenue in the last few years, and that's because of an accounting rule change. So student and school activities are kind of what you would think they sound like. It's the class fund, it's the certain club funds, or a field trip fund that the school may do fundraising, may be working with some partners and generating some revenue there. And those balances, they roll over every year. So if they did a fundraiser and only spent part of the funds are still available for them to use the next year. And the public purpose trust funds, we have several trusts for the benefit of the district. Most of them are scholarship related. There are a few for other specific purposes. Debt service is what it sounds like. We have issued bonds for long-term capital. So this is where we collect the money to make the payments on those bonds. Capital projects, again, it's related to capital type of activities and including buildings, major renovations, and equipment. Fiduciary funds, we have a couple trust funds that still qualify to be called fiduciary.
We're the fiduciary? Or-
Yes.
Mhm.
On the next, just going into general fund revenue, and to give you a high-level overview there, there are three categories basically for general fund revenue: local, state, and federal. And there's listed some of the things that would fall into each of those categories. With local, the property taxes, investment income, some money that we get in through the ISD, and state, foundation allowance, and then there's several state aid categorical specific grants for specific purposes. And federal, it's primarily a lot of our title grants and a few other grants there. In the last 2 years, is it only two, almost three, I guess, coming up with on COVID-related grants, so.
Mhm.
Foundation allowance, it sounds like an easy concept. You get blended student count times the state per pupil amount. It gets a little bit more complicated in that there are two components to that: local property tax and state aid. So the state will use the taxable value information that's submitted by King County, and they assume that we're collecting all of that state or the property tax information from there, and then they subtract that amount from the total foundation revenue to determine the amount that they'll give us in state aid. So that's kind of the word definition, but sometimes it's easier to look at it and as an example. So you've got our per pupil foundation allowance this year is $9,150 per student. Our blended student count for this year off from our January state aid status, which is just a report that the state gives us to say, here's this month's revenue in these individual line items. So we're at 13,775 students. So our total foundation allowance is just that, a little bit over 126 million. Right now, we're estimating our local property taxes to be that 44,930,000. So what we'll get on state aid is about that $81,111,000.
So a couple of questions, or maybe clarifications. So the local property tax, that's non-homestead, right? So we collect that just from businesses, not from,
It's both.
it's both, okay, for this part, okay, great.
For this part, yep. It's any.
For the
it could be
calculation.
personal property taxes.
Yep.
It could be.
Very good. And then for the benefit of my colleagues and me truly, when the per pupil foundation allowance differs district to district, which sometimes it does, how is that calculated? Or is that not the case anymore?
That's what I was going to say. That was
Yeah.
one in last year's state aid. I believe it was last year. The years start to blend for me. But they did finally, after all these years of Proposal A, get all of the districts on the same foundation allowance.
Great.
So,
Okay, thank you. So that discrepancy doesn't exist anymore.
correct.
Great, thank you.
And before you continue, what is our FY year?
Is it what up?
Fiscal year.
July to June 30. July 1st to June 30.
Thank you.
So big picture, just to give you some of the categories there. So property taxes make about 15% of our general fund revenue. And this is off from our original budget adoption. As you see from the agenda today, we've got a budget amendment coming, but this is off our original budget. So other local sources, and that's some of the money that's coming in through Kent ISD. State restricted are some of the state categorical grants in there. State unrestricted is primarily our foundation allowance. And the federal money is those basically the title grants that are out there for federal money. There's a little bit money that comes out to 0%, but that we do transfer in from other funds, and that is an indirect charge to the food service fund. So this is just a list of some of our major grants and the amounts that were in the original 22-23 budget. Looking up there, and won't read it to you, but section 41, I just want to note there, we've got an abbreviation in there for EL, that's our English language scholars. Title 4, it's also supplemental services. It follows a lot of the same requirements of Title 1A, so we use it for similar purposes as our Title 1A. And here are last two remaining COVID-related grants at this point. The original ESSER 2 grant was about $33 million, and our ESSER 3 allocation is about $74 million. So this is only what we were planning on using for this fiscal year. ESSER 2 will come to an end at the end of this fiscal year is what we're planning. The spend out period actually goes through September 30th, but wanting to make sure we get things closed out properly and reporting into the state, we're planning on having that grant fully expended by June 30th with some site cleanup into July. And then the ESSER 3 grant, that goes through June 30th of next year. Hopeful and hearing some rumblings that that deadline may be extended. It was a large amount of money to spend in a short amount of time, and has come through some challenges with supply chain difficulties, and especially in the early phases of it, we were trying to spend it at the same time they've been revising the rules and regulations. So that's also a challenge. They just, at the end of December, issued new guidance again. So I'm still working through what may have changed in this grant. So
Before you move forward with the ESSER 2 funds, and we're coming up on a, I guess, quick deadline in retrospect. And you just stated that those are already allocated to be spent out. Where can we find that? And where these dollars, this $11 million, is already programmed to go to?
I can pull together a description for you on the ESSER grants and how we've been spending them. Earlier, and I don't remember, we have shown some of our ESSER spending.
Yeah, it's been a while,
and what that's looked like over the course of the years, and we're actually amending that ESSER 2 grant right now, in the process of doing that. So we can bring an update of how those funds have been spent and how we're planning to spend that also, and how we're planning on spending the ESSER 3 grant. So
Thank you. And then I guess I'll wait till you get done writing that, because
That's what was gonna
I
say.
hate when
I
people,
know, so I
yeah,
don't
let me
forget,
wait.
make a promise that I forget to fulfill. Okay.
How, when was the ESSER 2 funds sent for approval, and who approved them? Was that this body that approved that prior to? Was this something that was done internally and then it came back to us? When did
I was
this?
gonna say July, like a year and a half ago in July, we presented an ESSER 2 and 3 plan to the Board of Education. And that's what we've been pretty much following for the last year and a half.
And it's that investment
Yes.
plan? Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
That's great.
And like I said, at the time that we did that plan, there are things in there that the guidance has come out, and we're shifting and not following exactly that plan anymore, but that's where we'll need to get it amended to what makes sense for now, and going forward. But that was our initial plan that we brought to the board.
Yeah, so when I saw that online, and that's what kind of made me ask, because it looked like it hasn't been updated since this was originally submitted. And so I was wondering what shifted, what adjusted from that, and then what is kind of that process? Like, if there is adjustments, is there a threshold that you don't have to come before us if it's 10% of an adjustment, just like how they did with grants? Or like, if something is adjusted from what the original plan was, how does that come back to us for approval?
So it hasn't come back to us for approval.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah.
In general, we've done the ESSER spending updates periodically.
Right.
And those have also, we haven't done one recently, so that's one that it needs, we'll be bringing that back to you as we finalize where it is. In general, especially for ESSER 2, it's very similar type items, what's in there. And we just may be adjusting dollar amounts. Not that there've been,
yeah,
we're gonna do
department changes are
something
yeah.
totally different.
Mhm.
There are a few things into ESER 3 that we are starting to get to, but some of it might be a new curriculum. We had a placeholder in there for, I think, the SEL curriculum, but as that's coming forward tonight and we've done more research, the dollar amount will be changing for the SEL curriculum that's in the ESER 3 app. So
Okay.
you haven't seen a comprehensive change, but things that have been coming through, like the purchasing agenda, you'll see a lot of it on the purchasing agenda. You'll see the notice, like ESSER funding.
So what I'm hearing then is, by and large, the categories of spending have not changed, just the dollar amounts have fluctuated as we've actualized costs
Or
from
they'll be
from
scaled.
estimates.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, really good question.
And I made the notes, so we'll work that into our more detailed information for you to come. And these are the bigger pictures of our general fund expense. So you'll see salaries and benefits make up of the majority. And the line item in there for special ed itinerant staff is also salaries and benefits. Those are our itinerant staff that we are dual employers with Kent ISD on those staff that work with support services for our special ed students. So 75% of our budget is salaries and benefits. That is our quick and very high level GRPS Finance 101. So we'll continue to update. If you've got more questions as we go along, we'll keep bringing more information. This is a lot to absorb, so.
Can this be shared with us?
When you get access to, you'll have it right in your, yes. So,
Thanks.
Yes,
As you
yes,
know.
absolutely. Yes, sorry that you did not have it in advance.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Ms. Cripps. So we're going to move on now to our action items, of which we have many, because we do have our budget amendment, three of them today to go through and approve. But the first is our purchasing agenda. So Ms. Cripps will walk us through that.
I'll bring that up here. So some of these things are routine items. That first one is a routine item. We have an agreement with the Catholic Diocese of Grand Rapids as a requirement that to transport their students as well. Rather than to use our transportation, we make a payment to them and they provide their own transportation. So this has been an ongoing agreement for many, many years. So that's what that one is. The next item down, we are using contracted custodial services to supplement our existing staff. We have a large number of vacancies in our custodial staff, so we are looking to use some outside services to supplement that. Our blanket order, what these are kind of routine monthly purchases that we spend throughout the year. So typically at the beginning of the year, we'll bring a list of vendors and services that we're expecting to spend for the year and a dollar amount. And then we draw off from that each month as we pay the vendor for their services or materials. So when we did the first adoption back last July, we were planning on spending $147,000 with this vendor. Because the needs have changed and we're still trying to make sure we are doing the best to keep buildings clean, we'd like to increase that blanket order by $225,000 for the new blanket total.
So I have a quick question. So initially, for all custodial services for the district, it was going to be $147,000. Oh, no, I was going to say before we realized how many vacancies we had. And
It's
so
kind of a combination thereof. We were also expecting to use another vendor as well, so I think there's some combination of increasing with this vendor because they might have a better fill rate or working with more of our things. So, and cleanliness of our buildings has continued to be a concern this year. So doing what it takes, and if we're not able to find, yes, we planned for it but we didn't plan for this level with this vendor.
And
So,
do,
Brett,
oh,
sorry. Do you know how many vendors we have right now for custodial by chance?
I want to say 2 or 3.
Okay. So this is just for that.
I don't, that's what I was gonna ask a clarifying question, because early, when you opened up, you said for the most part, I'm really big on word choice.
Okay.
So you said for the most part, it's dealing with the vendors. And so my assumption is, what's the other gray area? If the majority of it is for the vendors, what part isn't for the vendors? Do you get what I'm asking you?
Say that in a different way. I'm not quite following.
So when you first opened up, you talked about how originally this custodian services, majority of that is going towards vendors, and they will you would present vendors and the contracts prior to at the beginning. And so to me, I understood where you were going. It just didn't paint a full picture for me. So like, what else out of that is not going towards vendor, or is this all strictly for vendors?
All strictly for vendors. Sorry,
do,
I missed
do
one.
we get, or are we able to get a breakdown of like, I know we most likely haven't spent, this money since we're just now, looking at this. But are we able to get a breakdown of where that money is being spent, even more so than just saying this is a blanket order for $250 or $225,000, like on X amount to this? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm asking? Well,
I'm
so
not
so
either.
I guess I'm confused about what blanket order. Like blanket order, I understand is we're giving this amount of money towards this vendor. Do they then like share with us like what this money went to exactly, like line item by line item?
We invoice this monthly for specific
Okay.
services.
And is that something that the finance committee has access to? Not that I'm trying to go line item by line item, but is that something that we do have access to?
I think if there was a specific concern about a building or the vendor, perhaps, but that is a level of detail that we entrust with the district,
Okay.
right? So this would be the level of which we approve would be looking, first of all, at that large list of vendors. I forget the month that usually comes out.
It's we usually try to do it in June, so they're ready for July 1st.
Okay, for the next
Depending
year
on
fiscal,
Sometimes
yeah,
it
for the budget.
doesn't come until one of your meetings in July.
Yeah, so a really good time to see a comprehensive list of all the vendors and all of those anticipated contract amounts, and ask questions about kind of how we divvy up contracts in the district. That's a great time and way to see that comprehensive list. And we could get that to you as well from last year's, just to give you a sense of what that looks like, so you know what a blanket order.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I add to what you're?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I guess especially when I think about Jose and I, and please forgive me if I'm speaking on your behalf, but as us being new and starting in January, right? I understand that we have a responsibility to kind of understand if we're going to approve something, where those funds are going to. So I get that it happened in June for this FY year, but because we weren't here, I think that's where it's like, what are those services? What are those vendors it's going to? Because blindly, I don't want to be like, oh yes, let's go ahead and do that if I don't even understand what vendors we're using, because I haven't had access or to see that. If it comes before us at that certain time of the year, and we have board members starting in January, how would we know what's?
Sure. Well, there's a budget that was approved. And so you are coming in mid-fiscal year with a lot of approvals that have happened ahead of your arriving, right? So I think it's a balance of entrusting the work that was done ahead of you to be able to proceed, right? And understanding that this in particular is, I think, the district listening to what community has said around the need for improved custodial services. So there is a fair amount of, I want to use the right words here, I guess trust, but also with discernment, so let us come back to you with some of that information. There will likely be some times that it is hard to know all the details, right, without getting too much into the weeds. But that's where we can come back next time around, like even with these blanket orders, and lift that up as a topic for further discussion and onboarding, if you'll let me do that from time to time.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all right, thank you.
My last question for you regarding the custodian services is, does this include the pool cleaning staff, or is that a separate?
Do you know who cleans the pools?
I do not know who cleans our pools.
Yeah.
I think our staff does some of it, but I don't know.
Because we do have paid custodial staff as well, so I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Yeah,
Okay,
we can find out.
thank you.
And one of the items that Ms. Shatke and I had talked about was to do a deeper dive on our purchasing.
Yeah,
pro-
it's complex.
process And all of that. So
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I want to make it clear. I don't want to like see where every single dollar, because that is so much more than I ever want to get into. But I just want to understand, when we say blanket order, what does that include? Just for my understanding.
Of course.
Definitely. Okay. So the next one, it's another blanket order. We use legal services, and True Law Firm is one of our legal firms that we use. So again, we're doing some additional work with them than what we had planned last May and June. So we're asking for an increase there as well. I think they've been advising on several different topics, so. The next item down is for our Coordinated Early Intervention Services program that MDE is requiring of us. So it's a mental health therapist for Ms. Davis and Ms. Shockey, that it correlates to an item that came through on an earlier purchase agenda. So this is the mental health therapist that will also be working with that Charles program that I think it was maybe even on your last purchasing, maybe in December.
Is that housed in a specific school, or do they go to multiple?
It's in different buildings throughout the district.
Throughout the
not one
district.
specific
Okay.
school.
Oh, so there's a trails department, in a sense, like with are there multiple different trail implementers? Or is this just the first and only one?
It's a part of a coordinated program. So this is, and we brought the rest of the program forward in an earlier purchasing agenda. This is the mental health therapist that will also help coordinate with implementing that program. Inventory, copy paper. It's going to be used throughout the district. And periodically we'll put this out to bid and increase our needs as we've got it, but then it is out at our warehouse to be used throughout the district. The next two items are actually really exciting items for me. They are, with our ESSER funding, we have been able to send middle school and high school students to Washington, D.C. for a week of close-up program. So I don't remember the exact number of the students that went last year, but a significant number of our middle school and high school students were able to participate. So it's not a program without ESSER that we would have been able to fund. As you see, it's got a couple large dollar amounts there. So
Yeah, for my fellow trustees, how many students do we know? I'm just curious, because I'm looking at that, it is a hefty dollar amount that's specifically for middle and then separate for high school students. Like how many?
Do you know how many students?
I don't remember, but I know they tried to include, I think, every middle school, including the K-8s, their middle school grant students as well. And I want to say it was like 20, or depending on the size of the school, it could have been 20 or 30 kids from each school going.
Per school building?
So it
Do you
wasn't
remember the
just
presentation?
like 5 students or,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, I want to say several hundred
Yeah.
Okay.
students that went.
And I know I was
chaperones.
still working at Alger when they were
Oh, great.
discussing that program. So there was 30 students that went from our school. So
nice.
I'm
Yeah.
assuming it was a number similar to that from each school.
Yeah, so it's
Thank you.
an exciting program. We had a lot of good reports on that one as well. The next item down, in operations, we have a number of very old computers that are not able to be upgraded anymore. So wanting to use some of our ESSER funds to get them up to a more usable version of software or hardware. Another item that's come up is, even though we've got one-to-one computers available for students. We want to make sure that when we come to this testing, that we've got computers that are functioning. You know, computers break are not functioning, and if it's a testing day, we want to make sure we've got computers available, that if their device isn't working, we've got functioning, charged computers to use for the online testing. The last item is the social emotional learning curriculum that we've been looking to implement, and that's what at your board work session we had the presentation from the SEL department on that. So this is bringing forward that curriculum that they were looking to purchase.
Can we pull that one out in particular?
Sure. So, yes, we can. Yep, absolutely. Is that the last one? Okay, great. So do you want to have discussion on it now, and then we can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I need to put a motion before we discuss that? Or?
Yeah. So I guess if you're comfortable, why don't we have a motion to? So the committee moves forward a recommendation to the board for approval. So this is the first layer of approval. It then moves forward to the full board. So the entire board always is the final layer of approval on the purchasing agenda. So motions here are to recommend approval to the board. So the motion for this would be to recommend approval for the purchasing agenda, less the item 5 under special funds, which is purchase of social emotional learning curriculum. So
May I ask one question first, Jen? I don't need an answer right now because I don't think it really fits with finance necessarily, but at some point, can the board be privy to how the district decides which computers are replaced district-wide?
What's the depreciation, yes, schedule for these? Yeah, okay.
Like, where is the priority, basically?
Yes, from my 6 years of serving, I know that ESSER has been truly a gift to the district because we have struggled to be able to keep up with technology. Year over year, before these funds were available to us, it was always that piece of the budget where it's like, if we could, we would have hundreds of thousands of dollars on this line item, but we can't. So it is really reassuring to see that we can finally catch up in this space, thanks to the extra funding we have. Okay, so if I could please have a motion to approve the purchasing agenda minus item 5 under special funds, which is the purchase of social emotional learning curriculum.
So moved.
Can I get support?
Support.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, so now let's move forward the purchase of the social emotional learning curriculum at $160,000. So let's open that up for discussion.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to pull this out because I remember when at this presentation, we, literally all of us, for the most part of trustees, had a lot of questions for that particular group that I remember them saying that they were going to come back to us with details. So for me, I caution about approving a line item with a dollar amount without having the information that we requested. Because it's saying a purchase of the program, but we had a lot of questions for them in regards to that. And so I would like this particular one to be tabled until another time, until we can get that information that each of us were requesting to have a full picture, because there was a lot of questions from that presentation that we all received. And the feedback or the answer we got back from them after presenting those questions across the board was that they were going to come back to us and give us some updates on that. And so
Ms. Cribbs, talk to us a little bit about any timeline or deadline constraints with the curriculum purchase. Do you think there'd be any pressure points to table this?
I'm not sure when they were trying to get it implemented. Just the timeline, if I could have somebody come to the next finance committee, but that's not going to be until the end of February. So then it's not going to be implemented until sometime in March. So
Right, and so finance's role is not to vet curriculum, it's to approve, ultimately the purchase of it. However, whose role it is to vet curriculum is first academic achievement and second full board. So perhaps what we could do with the tabling is with the intent to just bring this forward in a board.
full board.
Yeah, right. So we wouldn't have to wait to finance until the end of February, which would then allow for the SEL department to give an update either at a board meeting or work session in February.
I was just thinking if I can work with Dr. Roby and
Yep.
find a time if it would fit into either upcoming board meeting or the upcoming work session.
Okay.
Your regular work session, not the one this week.
Oh,
Right.
The one this week's already filled, but.
So then can I make a motion to, or can I move to table this until our next board meeting of the whole? What is the title of that?
That's great. That's
Okay.
perfect. Yep, very good. Looking for support?
Support.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. A good discussion on purchasing. All right, well, on to some of the most complicated work of the district,
That's what I was
budgets
gonna say.
and budget
Now
amendments.
We're gonna get to the budget amendment, and this first part is just the resolution. So it's a lot of words. The real numbers part of it comes following here. So, this is a summary of what we're gonna talk about in a minute from the detailed memo. It's
Okay,
in
great.
total, this is, yes, what you're gonna ask to be adopt for the budget amendment, but to get to these big numbers, we're gonna go through the detailed, in these following pages. So there's revenue, and on expenses, we're looking to increase the expenses by $18 million for a combined total of $276 million on general fund. So easiest way to look at it is in parts and pieces. And this is where earlier when I was saying our general fund is broken into the three components for general operations, grants, and athletics. I'm gonna kind of go through this quickly, but if you've got questions as you've been doing, ask questions. So, as you know, interest rates have been rising significantly over the last several months, so we are actually generating an investment income. After many years of having almost no investment income, it's a significant increase there. Property tax revenue, this is one when we talked about the foundation allowance being two components. So our property tax revenue is increasing, taxable values in Kent County are increasing, but our membership revenue down below is decreasing. That's a combination of a couple factors in there, in that when we were doing our preliminary budget, the state still hadn't enacted our State Aid Act, and we were hearing a range of possible foundation allowance increases. So we budgeted for a $500 per pupil increase. It came in at $450. So this is an adjustment for that. Our pupil count is also down about 170 students from what we had budgeted.
Let me stop you there for a minute. So with budgets, we are legally required as a school to submit and have our budget approved by the end of June, so June 30th. But the state is not required to have a budget approved until September 30, which is why we don't know what our allocation will be per pupil, right? So that is in part why these budget amendments come, as we are using very educated guesses at what we think will happen based on the budgets that have been set forth by the governor, the House, and the Senate. But that's some of the why behind it.
Thank you for that.
And likewise, as we go down through some of these, and like Ms. Shockey mentioned, our best estimate, our best information that we've got, we'll put forth our best idea of what it's gonna be, but then as it is a budget, we have to periodically amend. And typically, we do two amendments. We do this big one in January, so we can pick up any changes in enrollment, state aid, anything else that happened through the fall. And then we'll do a final budget amendment in May and for adoption in June. So that one's kind of our cleanup, any last minute adjustments. One of the big ones that typically hits there as well as utilities. At this point in the year, yeah, we looked at our utility expense and where things are trending, but a lot of our bills for January, February, and March, which are high heating months, we don't know what that's really gonna bring until we actually see it. So that's one that may be a bigger adjustment when we get to May. But going back to general operating revenue, there are a couple items in there with special ed transportation. Act 18 is a countywide special ed millage, and the enhancement millage that we have district-wide. So those are items that we come in as an allocation that we receive through Kent ISD. And we receive a portion of the county. So enhancement millage, for an example, it's Kent ISD collects that money and then allocates it out to the individual local school districts based on student enrollment. So depending on the amount that they collect and our enrollment versus the other districts in Kent County, we get an allocation. So we've got a slight adjustment to that. Going over to some of our local grants, again, the increases and decreases are just adjustments to our original projection of what these costs were gonna be for those individual grants. And there's a slight adjustment to athletics admissions revenue and what we're projecting out for there. State sources, again, we've talked about the membership revenue. We have several state aid categoricals in there. One of them, and I've got an abbreviation in there for line R. This is one of those where I try to give you line items because there's a lot of detail there. So line R says section 147A, 147C, 147E, MIPSR's categorical revenue. That relates to our retirement system that we're required to participate with the state of Michigan. And there are several different line items in there, several of which they're required to put the money out to us and then we turn around and pay a bill back for the exact same amount. So, and those, some of them, 147A and 147C are based on our percentage of salary dollars participating in that versus statewide salaries of districts participating. So again, it's a really hard number to estimate when we don't know all what's happening in the rest of the state. So section 51F, special education, that was a separate line item last year for special ed as a state aid categorical. They eliminated it when they actually did the state aid act this year. They changed some of our funding of state aid and special ed funding and actually increased it on the membership in section 51C. So, I was trying to think.
So with that reduction of the 920,000, does that get absorbed elsewhere?
Right, so the membership revenue actually increased on it, but that membership revenue, because it has so many parts and pieces, is showing as the $5 million decrease. Part of that is the $6 million property tax increase, the loss of student count, and our lower than budgeted per pupil amount. So it's a lot of moving parts into make one number on here.
So there was no change in service or anything, or really, yeah, right. It's just a movement of how that's being funded is what you're seeing there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Down to federal sources, on general operating, there's very little in there that's comes in under federal sources. We've got a slight reduction there on ROTC based on what the federal government reimburses us or pays us a portion of our ROTC staff. They're not fully funded, but there's a portion in there, and it's based on the salaries that the staff make. The adjustments under the grants, we do our best to estimate, and again, these are adjustments. The other thing, a lot of these grants will have carryover. So if we didn't fully expend last year's grant, it will carry over to the new year. So the big numbers there, like under 1A, 1D, Title II, and Title IV, and actually, yeah, all of those are pretty much bringing on our carryover dollars. Also, on those grants, we don't get our final allocation amounts until October. So we base our best estimate in June. I'm also, as you will learn, I'm conservative. So would like to budget on the low side on revenue, so it's an increase, not oh, we've got to readjust our whole program and take something away in October or November. So that's why you're seeing some larger adjustments there. The transfer from food service, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but that might be a new term as well. With the food service program, we are allowed to charge an indirect charge to them, and it's a rate that is calculated by MDE and we're allowed to use. What that will do is there are costs in general fund that are for the benefit, but not direct charges to food service. For example, like the business office staff, I've got a couple staff members that work a lot in my salary. We don't charge it to the food service program, but there's benefit to the food service program. HR, accounts payable, MIS staff, all provide services to food service, and their costs are captured back in this indirect cost. So that's adjustment to our new calculation of what food service will be doing there.
So because of those charges, there was an increase in,
Revenue on the general operating side, when we get to food service, you'll see the increase in it and the transfer out on their side. Going down to expense, as I mentioned earlier, we've got salary and benefits. What we project typically to start the year is most of our positions will be fully staffed at the beginning of the year, but as you know, we've had a large number of vacancies, so you'll see here we've got, we're bringing them down to our projected what we're gonna spend before the end of the year, so salaries and benefits and under instruction, thinking that that's going to bring down, but the next line item down, we've got subs and instructional services increasing. So trying to make sure we've got coverage in providing services, but it's just gonna shift between salary and benefits and substitutes and purchase services.
does it cost us more to have substitutes right now than permanent staffing?
The other factor in that is to increase our fill rate for substitutes. We've also increased our rate that we're paying substitutes this year. And that happened in August or September, so it wasn't in our original budget to increase those pay rates, and some of them.
Are we still, I think at one time, at that time, we were best in district for
And
sub
that's-
rates.
Tried to
It
stay
still
on
is.
top.
Yes,
I work for
that-
EduStaff, so I
Yes.
know.
Best
Who
in,
makes the
county,
decision
yeah.
to increase the rate? Is it just district leaders talking with EduStaff administrators? How does that decision get made?
What we did this year is knowing we wanted to stay on at least be one of the best in
Competitive,
Kent
yes.
counties to increase our fill rates as much as we could. So we did, as our HR department was calling around and checking to see what other districts were offering. Several of them were increasing their rates as well. And we wanted to keep our fill rates up as best we could. So as an administration, and we talked about what could we offer.
Yep, and that was brought to the board as well, although I don't recall if we voted on it or not, but I do remember the presentation and certainly consensus that we agreed that was a good decision.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sorry, I just had one question. So, okay, in this expense, the parentheses would indicate a decrease in expense, correct? Okay, I just
Yep.
wanted to make sure I'm reading that correctly. I have never seen a chart like this, so I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
No, you're
Good question.
absolutely right. The other thing that's on there, on the grant funds, because they come with such specific requirements for each different grant, we typically just include everything in the big categories of instruction and support. But those line items will be similar to what you're seeing under general operating with salary and benefit adjustments, purchase services or supplies and materials. We just, to keep it to something that's more manageable to look at, all of that, we just kind of lump all those grant-related adjustments and tell you some of the grants that are impacted there as well. Going down to the other section, Where I mentioned the food service, we have the indirect costs, we also have that with our grant programs. So between general fund, we'll get a credit in on the 101 side to offset some of our expenses there, but our grant programs are able to pick up those costs. Our athletics program, we do a large general fund transfer over to fund the amount that is not funded through either admissions or our grant from the Grand Rapids Student Advance, or no, Grand Rapids Public Schools Foundation. Sorry, there's still SAF in my mind. Still working on that one. So GRPS Foundation is another revenue source for athletics, but we're increasing the expense on the transfer over to offset and keep athletics as a balanced fund is there.
And that's maintaining our current athletic program, not adding any additional.
Correct.
Okay.
Though we are seeing some higher participation rates right now, so we are hiring some additional coaches as well, so.
So there'll be another amendment coming
Very likely. Yeah, we'd see it.
towards, okay.
An amendment 2, it would be likely we'd see it, yep.
The next line item is an unusual line item, but one that I wanted to bring back. We have a large number of capital projects that are going on, whether it's our HVAC updates, our playgrounds, our parking lots, the new recent developments with the pools and auditoriums, and some of those capital things. Yes, we could pay for them out of our general fund, but with them being capital projects, we do have capital projects fund that's, I want to say more, has been dormant for a number of years, and just thought it would be more easier to manage and track what we're doing on these capital projects if we did a general fund transfer over to capital projects, and that way we can track those types of items separately, and it doesn't cause this a large fluctuation in our regular general operating expenses. So as MDE and state law allows, we can transfer up to 20%, which would be, I want to say 16 million if I remember correctly. So just wanted to build a little bit of fund over there as we've been improving, especially HVAC, playgrounds, parking lot repairs, and we'll have pools and auditorium expenses coming through as well. So
Clarifying question. You said we can only transfer up to 10%?
20%.
20%, is that per FY year
Yes,
or?
fiscal
Okay.
year. Don't want to get that high, but I just wanted to have a fund over there because especially those HVAC projects, when we started talking about them, they were around $20 million. With all of the supply chain and cost increases and all of that, the amount has grown significantly. So we're going to have to start to prioritize and what we can do when and all of that as well. But just want to manage it through a capital projects fund.
So I'm gonna ask a twofold question.
Okay.
So what I heard you saying, please correct me, if I invite you to correct me, is using the aspect of certain funds from the capital fund will address the pool. It can be used to address the
Right.
pool, but we don't know. That will come to us in regards to like what
Yeah.
the plan is for that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, we'll approve any of those expenditures on capital projects. This is just creating a fund really for the benefit of accounting and for us to be able to see, instead of it being a line item in the general fund with everything else that we do, what specifically are we spending on capital projects and how are we managing those dollars? And this is the way I see it as kind of this window between bond projects. You know, for the last 6 years, we've been spending down bond dollars, which is where you've seen all of the capital projects now. Those are almost completely expended, but we have this time, right, where we don't have those dollars to utilize for capital improvement projects. So we need to create this separate, unique fund within the district to be able to manage those.
None of the asset funds transferred over in these items?
Potentially, I don't know the answer to
That's what I was
that.
gonna say. ESSER, that's one of the, in our original plan, if you see, we did have a lot of capital, the parking lots, and all of those were part of our original plan, but as they came out with additional guidance and additional requirements that would be allowed, that you would be allowed to use ESSER funds for it. It adds a lot more, and we were afraid at that point it's hard enough to find contractors that they wouldn't be bidding on our projects if we had to do all the requirements that were required to use ESSER funds.
And there's also the spend deadline, and with what's happening in construction with material and equipment, there's just not guarantees that we could, in many cases, depend that we would be able to use those funds for that expenditure. So prioritizing ESSER funds for operational instructional things has been the path, and then using general fund, now capital projects for capital improvements has been the way that it's been managed.
And
That's one thing I
so
know.
this $7.5 million, that is just being transferred out of the general fund to put into the capital fund for future use of capital projects. So,
Right.
okay.
And we've had a number of capital projects that are already in process.
Right.
So we'll fund those projects as well. We're moving the expense that had been sitting in 101,
Yeah.
general operating, over to that fund as well.
Okay.
And you think the 7.5?
7.5.
Thank you. You think the 7.5 is enough for those ongoing?
No.
Ongoing, no, but it's a start.
Okay.
That's right. That's right.
now.
Again, it's the
Yeah.
best I've seen, the healthiest we've been in my time here. So it is definitely a step in the right direction, but it will not cover the needs of the district. Yeah.
Yes, we have a lot of needs right now, so. So that is general operating. One thing, and I think Ms. Shadke mentioned that we do have a board policy on our fund balance. So with this adoption, and I'm gonna slide back up towards the top again, if I can get there. Oops, there we go. So our original fund balance when we closed after the audit at June 30th, 22, was $20,798,639. Our original budget adoption was about a break-even budget, so we were looking to add $36,000 to our budget, or to our fund balance. This amendment, the proposed increase for general fund is a $12 million increase on revenue and an $18 million increase on expense. But the biggest part of that increase in expense is that transfer to capital projects. So this is a use of $6 million of our fund balance to come down to, right now we're projecting our fund balance would be that $14,720,000. So our fund balance policy, or the board's fund balance policy, is that we are looking to have a fund balance of 10% of projected annual unrestricted general operating revenues. And that's a mouthful. But it is based on the early warning regulations from MDE in the state. Right now, what this calculation, and our former CFO started this, so the board members that have been around might remember this chart if it pulls up here, of our fund balance and what it looks like. And so if I go down, using our projected fund balance here on Amendment 1 of that $14 million, these are all of the, if I can get that to go away, unrestricted revenues that come through. To calculate that out, we'll be at 9.61%. So it's close to the board's policy of the 10%, given the 5% leeway on either side, so.
Yeah. So board policy, is it 5 to 10%? Or is it 10% is the goal?
5%.
It's 10% is the goal.
Yep.
With a variance of 5% greater or lower.
Very good. Okay, yes. And it's 5%, a fund balance of 5% that triggers the state's early warning system. So that's it's the space that we don't want to be near, right? So as you look historically, could you scroll up so we could see the headers by date? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, 2019 audited final was 8.5. Yep, 2020, of course, that was when we were first in the pandemic, 7.26. So you can see how that has changed over time. So, so 10% is the goal with a 5% variance. So really between 5 and 15% would meet board policy. Yep, which we have maintained.
So that's, I wanted just to point out that even though it was a large use of fund balance, we're still within your board policy.
So this amendment is actually more than the original.
And that's with how the other, the actual unrestricted revenues are calculating out, so.
Okay.
We'll go back to the agenda. So do you want to do,
Yeah, let's do an approval. So the way that our budget and budget amendments work is we have to do 3 separate approvals of the 3 separate funds. So general fund, special revenue fund, and debt retirement fund, which was described in our brief 101. So we will first look for a motion to move forward for approval, the adoption of budget amendment 1, general fund to the full board.
I move to adopt budget amendment 1 to be brought to the full board.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, carries. We'll move on.
okay, now it gets easier. We get to special revenue. Again, here are the words of the actual resolution that will come before the board. The next group down, this includes all of the special revenue funds lumped together for revenue and then expense. But the easiest way to look at it, and there's the individual special revenue funds across the board. But again, the easiest way to really look at it is to go to the memo to tell you what the changes, the detail changes are. Fund balance up here for the special revenue funds totaled the 5.2 million. This change is a $532,000 increase of use of fund balance to bring down our projected fund balance across all special revenue funds to just under or the 5.1 million. So food service is the biggest one, so we break that one out by itself and to give you a little bit more detail. So in there, under local sources, again, you'll see the investment income, we're projecting an increase there. Also, we do some sales, a la carte items and other catering type events through there, so that's projecting out higher, increasing there. Slight increase on state revenue for food service and the federal revenue based on meal counts. The other special revenue is related to our grass program, I believe, and adjustments there. Food service, you'll see the increase in expenses related to salaries and benefits. That is one where we did not have a settled contract when we did the original budget adoption, so increase that to our new projected. And then some small other adjustments there. And this, if you remember way back to when we talked about the transfer in on the general fund, here you see the transfer out on food service for that 109,000. So a lot less to look at when you get to special revenue funds, so.
So the salaries and benefits increase in expense is only for food service? Okay,
In that line, yes.
okay.
Overall, so the overall was a decrease.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, with that, I will entertain a motion to move forward the adoption of Budget Amendment 1, Special Revenue Fund.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that carries. Now our Debt Retirement Fund.
Now we're to debt retirement. You notice they'll get progressively easier.
Sorry, one question. May I ask what the, so do we look at all the funds fund balance like in the same relation? Or do we just, are we mostly concerned with just the general funds fund balance?
And general fund is the specific one where we have the fund balance
For the-
policy on
yep.
it. The other funds, food service, there's a general guideline, we're supposed to have a 3 month of expenditures fund balance.
Okay,
If you start to go over that, we will get a letter from MDE suggesting that we develop a plan, well, not suggesting. Develop a plan
Yeah.
to spend down that fund balance to get it back within, about that 3 month of expenditures there, so.
okay,
And the other two funds, the grass program will accumulate a fund balance. Their revenue generally exceeds their expenses. What we're trying to do there is accumulate some fund balance so we can update that program. I know right now, a few months ago, we did bring, I think, to the board for approval, looking to hire some consultants to help us, lack of a better term, modernize grass. You know, it's the paper packets you send home, and that's not necessarily the way kids want to learn these days. So we're trying to look at to modernize that. So we've been intentionally building up that fund balance to be able to work on that program as well. The other Houseman, we try to keep that about a break even, where the revenue and expenses balance.
Really good question.
So moving to debt retirement, we have, again, you get the summary here of the changes, but it's, this one I don't do a memo on because it typically doesn't have a lot of change from original adoption to final on the expenses. We know what our scheduled bond payments are for principal and interest. There's a little bit in there for other, there are sometimes property tax adjustments and repayments that we have to make in that, so sometimes there'll be a slight adjustment to those. Primarily, the adjustments that would come through, and you can see it on the summary more, it's in that property tax number and investment income. So that's debt
Yep.
retirement.
All right, unless there's any question or discussion, I'll entertain a motion to move forward the adoption of Budget Amendment 1, Debt Retirement Fund.
A motion.
May I have a second?
second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Okay, now we'll move forward to donations. And this is one of those items that I hope to have a more in-depth discussion about at a future meeting, but certainly we'll take any individual questions you have on these donations. But our board policy around donations is anything greater than 2,500 comes to finance first for recommendation for approval, and then the board ultimately approves those at a regular board meeting. I'll let you take it from here.
Okay, so our first one is for our GRPS Innovation Central High School Academy of Design and Construction. With that, there are a number of contractors, advisory board in that, and they do an annual fundraiser. So as part of that fundraiser, Associated Builders and Contractors of West Michigan acted as the fiduciary of it, and this is the money that they raised and are giving back to us and how they're asking us to spend it.
So if there's no questions or discussion, I will entertain a motion for approval of this donation.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. Sorry, yes, I
Make sure that
Was a little
clear.
too
It was
fast.
delayed, but my eye was for support.
thank you. Okay, next donation.
This one is over the last, I want to say, year or two, this individual has become I don't know, she puts it out there of various things that we need. So sometimes she's fundraising, and this one is a lot of winter apparel, hats and gloves and mittens and snow pants and all of those good things to help our students. And various community members, you'll see her name plus 75 friends, donated all of these wonderful donations, and these are where we distributed them out. We work with our communications department to spread these out as need arises across the district. So it's an exciting, well-needed donation.
I do have a few questions about this one.
Okay.
First, so I understand that it has to come to us for approval over 2,500. So with something that was given out to students in November, how does that work as far as approving retroactively? Is it just assumed that, it's something that would be approved? Or I guess how does that work?
Yeah, typically for something like this where the need was there.
Right.
We did move ahead and go ahead and donate it, get it distributed to children.
Right.
It was taking us a while to get all the paperwork accumulated, and we also did not have a December board finance committee.
Okay.
So typically
Sure,
we'd
like
be a
these-
little bit more timely on it,
Yeah.
but, and try to, and as you'll see, there's a couple other ones that are coming where, they were trying to get ahead and we're like, no, it's gotta go to the board first. But
Right.
on this one, yes, I did make the assumption that the
No,
board
it's like
would not choose
these
to
kids
turn
are
down
cold.
a
They need,
donation.
yeah, no,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
Boots and hats and gloves.
Is this something that, for the future, since she does this on a yearly basis, that this can be intentionally brought forth
That's what we're
before
trying
us?
to
So,
get to, as
Okay.
she is bringing them in. But we're also trying to get things like this out as quickly as we can.
Right.
does this work side by side with the Warm, Safe, and Drive?
This will be on, it will be something in addition to, because the one that, when GRPS Foundation was talking about their fundraising drive, that will be something in addition to this.
Is that what you were referencing? Okay, great.
And sorry, the second question, I did email you this question, and I guess I just needed a little more clarification as to, this the statement at the bottom,
Oh.
the business division. Who comprises of the business division?
Ultimately, it comes through me.
Okay. Okay.
My staff help me and get it, and as they're working with buildings or other departments, and as things come in, there's ones that will spend a lot more time trying to track down and make sure we understand something like this. It's more, we typically, after we have it, we do ask, like the buildings to do thank you notes from the kids so we can get thank you notes out. And I know it means a lot to these donors, especially that they're getting some thank you notes from the students that actually receive the hats and gloves and coats.
So my experience has been the term business office is kind of synonymous with like finance in our district. So purchasing would be there, CFO, yeah, what other
That's
functions?
what I was gonna say, depending on what it is, if I've got a legal question, I'll ask those questions. Definitely go to our executive directors too, if it's specific for a building. What's going on, we need more details on this and.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I am, I guess, asking the rest of our seasoned trustees, how are the schools decided on what school receives these donations?
Yeah, this is something that Ms. Cribbs and I were just talking about too. If there was a relatively simple way for us to see a breakdown of by school who is receiving donations. So, you see them throughout the year through this process, but to see them comprehensively, we don't see that as a board. So that is something that we're working
That's
on.
what I was gonna say,
Yeah.
we've discussed it. Some of them, as they come through, are specific to a building and most likely are coming as a result of that building's relationship with a community partner. So something like this where it's a more generic thing, we're talking with building principals to find out where areas of greatest need are that we can supplement with this, and those will start to try to vary across buildings throughout the district to fit greatest need.
Okay, thank you.
All right, may I please have a motion to move forward the donation from Sherry Lynn No and Friends?
So moved?
Support?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, the next donation from WXMI Fox 17.
So this is one where they and their viewers are wanting to sponsor like a school book fair for Cesar Chavez. So we're bringing that forward. This is one where we postponed it, so we could get it before the board, before it actually happened. So it's been postponed until after it can work through the proper approval process of coming to you first. So looking for all of the students at Cesar Chavez to be able to select 5 books.
I have a question for you. Is this yearly?
One time,
I
right?
think this is a one-time.
I motion to move this donation forward.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, that motion carries. And next donation from the XQ grant.
Oh,
I do have a quick question before we move. Do we typically, when we get donors like this, and this was like that first time, I'm assuming someone works, this is a good cause, right? And so I'm
Yeah.
assuming someone works with them to see if this can be a reoccurring thing for our scholars?
I would hope so. I'm not sure what the function is there. Maybe communications?
that's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say. That would be one of them, and with it being the television station and it being regionally, my guess, and it's truly just my guess, is they will, depending on how much funds it raised, they will likely spread it across the region. So we may get that this year,
Yeah,
it
right.
may go to a different school next year. There may be multiple ones that, I don't know how much they raised and how they selected.
It's a great thing, and especially as I think about the book exchange that we have out there. So it just had me start
yeah.
thinking, well, as they get new books each year, and let's say they outgrow them, what are we doing with those books? Do we have them go and they donate that to another school, the books that they already use? I was just thinking about how to
Pay it forward.
pay that forward continuously from the students and teaching them that, the scholars. I just was curious.
So the next one, and at least on the agenda, I skipped down one. We've got the XQ grant extension. So XQ was a grant that we received 5 years ago. It ended as of June 30th, but they did let us carry over to complete a summer program. It was a $10 million grant to help us implement GRPS Museum High School. As part of that, they're wanting to give us a $100,000 extension to kind of continue the progress on the professional development, and you see this nice long list of things they want us to continue to do, but it's to maintain that partnership that we developed with them over the last 5 years and be able to expand what we're learning at museum school with the place-based education throughout our district as well as other areas. So looking to accept this grant extension.
May I have a motion to move forward this donation?
So moved.
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. All right, last donation request.
Last one, and it's coming back up to the MySTEM Network mini grant. Earlier this fall, Grand Rapids Montessori Elementary received another mini grant, and this came through as an additional amount to be added to that for their STEM project that they have going on. So native plants and various topics, including native plants and songbirds. So
I move to move this mini grant forward.
Support.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
okay, I'm just gonna keep going. if
Yes,
that's fine.
yes, by all
So
means,
our
yes.
next
Financial
step-
reports.
And since, in the interest, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time walking you through this, just gonna hit a couple highlights. So in our monthly financial statements, you'll get this cover sheet, kind of details all the pages that follow and what's there. And I usually hits a couple highlights of what else is included in the financial statements as you see them. Again, you'll see the different areas. Here you get a balance sheet, including our fund balance down here that's at this whopping 37 million. That will decrease as we go down through the year and spend money. We get some large amount of our property tax money comes early in the year, so it increases our fund balance. We spend it down throughout the year. And then you get the breakdown of the three categories: general programs, grants and athletics, revenue, and expense, and you kind of get an idea of what percentage we are to our budgets. So this one is still working off our original budget. We will update it when we bring our January financial statements to you. You'll get January financial statements at your February meeting, so hopefully the board has approved the budget amendment and will update the budgets at that point. So you'll see a few places where, some of these things look a little unusual. Likely they will be adjusted in the amendment. Again, you get a financial statement on the special revenue. Typically, we're not on our monthly statements reporting on the trust funds. There's very little activity during the year on those, as well as the school activity funds. We can look at this point, there's just not as much activity going through those funds. But this is the part that will probably be a little bit easier. We try to highlight some of the items that look a little bit unusual on those monthly financial statements for you and give you a little bit of an explanation here. So these are just reports out. Again, you'll get the monthly report on where we are on the debt retirement fund, a balance sheet, and a revenue and expense. Capital projects funds, we are not required to, and we don't budget specifically for capital projects, but we do include those in our monthly financial statements for you. So again, you'll see the balance sheet, and as Ms. Schottke mentioned earlier, we've been working off this bond program, so that's the money that's left in the bond fund.
And that's from 2012?
Well, 2019,
Yeah.
the 2019 bond.
Oh,
issue.
I didn't know there was one in 2019.
Well, so it was the 2012 bond that the voters approved. However, there are issuances of the bonds, right? So we draw down certain percentages of that bond over time. So we're looking at what we drew out of those bond funds in 2019. Am I saying that right?
That's what I was gonna
Okay.
say. Yeah, when we went for the large amount, you have to spend within a certain time period. So we do them like in series. So
Okay.
the first series, we've spent it, we're coming to the end of the 2019, I believe has to be spent by December 31st of 2023.
And is that our final stage of this bond allowance?
Yes.
Okay.
And here's the expenses that are going through the current year. So that's where you'll see primarily the work right now that's going through that is for Innovation Central. The other part that's in the monthly financial statements is this overall cash and receipts and disbursements, broken out by fund as well. The big picture of the reconciliation to those, and a list of our investments. So there are our monthly financial statements.
Thank you. Do we have a bond construction update? I don't see Mr. Smart.
Then
No bond construction
bond
update.
construction
Very good.
update, then.
Okay. Very good. And then the January Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference.
I'm gonna keep this pretty high level, just because it's been a really long meeting for all of you on your
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
your first finance committee. You're all gonna say, what did I just sign up for? But, so the state typically holds two revenue consensus where the administration, the House and the Senate come together and determine and forecast out revenue for the state. in both the general operating and state school aid fund. They forecast out like 2 or 3 years for all of the funds and then adjust it normally. So both the state's general fund, general purpose, and their school aid fund have some, are significant. They've got minor downward adjustments for fiscal year '23, so they're kind of anticipating we may or may not see a recession, but it may slow from what it has been the last couple of years. But sales tax, use tax, income tax, and state educational tax continue to be very strong, which is encouraging. The other one that's big is, though, they are still projecting pupil membership estimates to decrease on the statewide. So they're about 5,000 or 6,000 students decrease in the next couple of years. So where we've been talking about it, for
our own
board
district,
members that have been
right?
around for longer, it's not just a GRPS is looking at declining enrollment. It's not just Kent County. The state is looking at fewer students in K-12. So just to notice, and I'm not gonna, you've seen a lot of numbers tonight, so I'm not gonna throw more numbers, but they do put out estimates of fund balances for their state, and they're in the billions. For general purpose, general fund, general purpose on the state, they're looking at a $5 billion fund balance at their end of their fiscal year, and almost a $6.8 billion for the end of their 23-24 year. And school aid, again, it's $4 billion at 22-23, and almost $5.5 billion. So there is a lot of money at the state level. Some of it is one-time funds, like some of ours is one-time funds. A lot of it is projected to be ongoing. As I was mentioning when Mr. Shockey and I were going through it, I remember years when we thought if the school aid fund at the state level had $1 million at the end of the year, it was a good year. So to have them have projecting billions available.
Do
it's
they have, at the state board level, do they have a policy like we do?
I don't believe so.
How do we find out?
Yeah,
So
I just
it-
Yeah.
write a state
That
board member
seems
and ask me.
like we should do something with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, and that's what they'll start working on, and the governor will put
Yeah.
out
Her budget, yeah.
proposal.
Okay.
Usually around the first week in February, so we'll have some updates on what that looks like. This will be a new look at it when you've got a Democratic governor and a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. That's not happened.
40 years.
That is,
They say once in a lifetime, but she is coming on Monday actually to Grand Rapids. The governor, that is, for the Econ Club. She's talking about her budget there as well.
So it will be an interesting what they actually decide to do with it. So with it, I want my hope is they'll be thoughtful about it, and put it in a way that it's easier for us to use. One of our struggles for some of you that have been on the board is sometimes when they make those little categoricals, my example there is they've got a lot of state grants for mental health. It's just really hard to find people
Health professionals,
to staff
yeah.
those positions. So it's like if they can find a way to give us the money in a way that we can actually use it, will be helpful. But there's a lot of money. It will be interesting to see what they come up with. So I'm also more hopeful that we'll have a budget sooner rather than
Yeah,
later.
that's right.
There's been years
Before
when
September
we haven't
30.
enacted our school aid budget until September. So
Yeah,
Well,
we hope. Good. Okay, well, that is a finance committee meeting. So to my new colleagues, that is a very typical cadence for us. So we always will start with those action items, so the purchasing agenda and the donations. Then we'll move into the reports, which is typically financial statements, bond updates, i.e. construction projects, and then anything else the district might have for us. And then now, to best onboard you to this work, we'll always start with a particular point of of this work so we can go do a deeper dive. So for February, I have down our purchasing policy, vendor engagement with the district. How does that work? Looking at that comprehensive blanket order to give you a sense of what that will look like when it comes back to us in June again. Also, our local first policy, so you know how vendors can get discounts on working with the district when they're located within the city of Grand Rapids. And then maybe we'll get a look at that governor's budget proposal too. Okay.
Do we have a supplier diversity program here?
We do not have a supplier diversity program here. Am I saying that right? If we don't know,
That's what I was
the
gonna
answer to that,
say.
we
It
do
seems
not have
like
a
we
supplier
something,
diversity
but
program.
I don't know that it would actually be supplier diversity. So I know we do try to do a preferential for local.
Yeah, that's been the extent of it thus far, is local preference over supplier diversity. But something that has been discussed, I would say, at this table for at least a couple of years. So work that would be good to see move forward, a balance between the policy committee and us here on finance. Yeah. Okay.
Wasn't it also that we discussed, at one point, I thought the district brought to us, discussed moving it to, not within the city, but within the county, so that we could have more diverse? I think that was
yeah.
the reason.
Yeah.
But,
So
so it has been
I'll work
discussed.
with you on who to bring, maybe from purchasing, who could help at the February meeting as well, answer some of these questions. Okay, well, I guess I'll just end with a statement that I heard many, many years ago in a board finance training, that the budget is a moral document, and it is where we really show what we prioritize, what we value in our district. And so although the meetings may be detailed and long, this work is very important, very, very important, and really shows, as a Board of Education, our commitment to our scholars' success and to supporting our staff and the district. So welcome to the work, and I'll adjourn this Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.